Oh.
Hello and welcome to Dancers Support Mission by Sabine for Shine Your Light. Today we have a new episode of Dancer to Dancer Words of Wisdom. And the goal of those interviews is to meet the person behind the dancer and share with you all not only the highlights of someone's career, but also the challenges behind the scenes. Truly, my wish is to bring healing into the dance world, dancing to heal, healing to dance, one artist at a time, and one personal story at a time. Hopefully, this will allow you to embark or reflect on your own personal healing journey, inspired by others' experiences. Sorry, I'm having difficulty talking today. So today I'm delighted to welcome Peter Leung. Peter is a dear friend of mine. We've met first a very long time ago when you started with a company, the Dutch National Ballet, and I was finishing my career. So we shortly met each other, and then we kind of met again, 15 years later in New Jersey. And then we really got to know each other really well. Peter is very fascinating creature. He's between dancer, poet, and creator. I don't know how to define you, but mostly I think you're a very kind soul. So everything you do transpires this. So I find that very inspiring, and I think it inspires a lot of people too. So Peter, welcome to my little interview.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
So listen, we're going to start. I always want to know a little bit of the history of my guest, because I find it very important how you got there. So could you tell us why you chose dance, and when was the point where you really decided to become a professional dancer? Because I guess there's always a turning point for that.
It's already interesting that you started off with why you chose dance in the past, and then why you choose dance. Like that, both are kind of relevant, because I feel like we have to continue to a certain degree to keep choosing, especially when you're not dancing anymore. But yeah, so like really, I try and keep it a bit concise, but basically when I was about 8 years old, I was in a singing and dancing show that my sister was actually part of, and by accident I sort of ended up auditioning and being ridiculously loud and outgoing and over energetic, and ended up in this performance also with my sister. And after that show, there was the directors of the show invited my sister and I to be part of the next show. And during that, there were actually some dancers from a local dance school. And during that, I was like, what are they doing? Because I really had no idea. There was no connection to dance. There was very little, I guess, on TV and all the rest of it. And then when I saw these dancers, I basically, from that moment on, kept asking my mum if I could go and do some dance classes too, to which she just kept saying no, like, you have a lot to do already, we're busy. And eventually, after about a year of me begging, she said, okay, fine, let's do it. I at the time said I don't want to go to a local dance school, or like too local, because I don't want other people to know I'm doing it. And so she found a school for me, and I started taking lessons. I was already, I think, 8 years old or almost 9. And I started in a class full of 5-year-old girls singing songs and clapping hands. And then pretty much immediately it was like, I absolutely do not want to do this anymore. To which she said, well, you said you wanted to do it. Now you're going to finish your classes, because you don't give up like that. And so I kind of, I continued, but then I moved pretty quickly at the beginning through with these dance classes. And then at this point, I was pretty courageous. And of course, this is pre-internet, 88, 89. And I just would write people letters. And we went to see a version of The Sleeping Beauty from a small company. And I just wrote to the director and said, how do I end up doing that? Like basically not what I was doing in my dance classes. And she wrote back to my mum and said, your son wrote me a letter. Maybe you should bring him up to see me. So we took a trip to London in the snow. She took a look. She, you know, checked a little bit my facilities and my coordination. And she said, you know, if he wants to do this, it's probably a good idea that he goes to a school that has, you know, better training. And so she told us all about the Royal Ballet School, and we applied. And then I went to the school, and for the first couple of years, hated it. It was a boarding school, and I just missed them a lot. And I don't know if I really knew what it meant to be a dancer or to be a professional dancer. And I think I had a lot of doubts about it the whole time. So I probably didn't decide. I don't know if you hear me because it says my internet connection is unstable.
Yeah,
I didn't really decide. Yeah, so people can fill in the gaps. I think I didn't really decide to be a dancer until quite late, because I think I always doubted how possible it was. But I think when I was 16 and in the upper school, and we were spending a lot of time close to the Royal Ballet Company, and these superheroes, these dancers from the company, I mean, all of them were superheroes, from the quarter ballet to the soloists and principals. I was like, I want to be like that. And I remember there was a dancer called Jonathan Cope, who was in the Royal Ballet, and he was just such the epitome of sort of grace, but also in the way that he worked with other people. That he was noble, but also seemed to like leave space or create space for other people. And I was like, well, if I'm going to be a dancer, I want to be like that, I guess. So I think probably in upper school, when I was like between 16 and 18, it became like a true ambition. And
but you
then I
still
knew that I
went
wanted to be
through your
professional.
younger years not knowing if this is what you wanted to do, and yet you were in the Royal Ballet School.
Yeah, I think it's got a lot to do. It's got a lot to do with the system. I don't know how it is now, but I think this constant like assessment every year, where you basically are re-auditioning to be in the school that you're in already. I think this, for me personally, gave me a lot of doubt, because I always put it up to the people outside of me to decide whether I could be a professional dancer or not, and whether I should stay.
Well, the world of ballet is a little bit like this. Your life is in the hands of others mostly, right? I mean, that's what they want us to believe.
Well, I mean, yes and no. I mean, I think to a certain degree, the whole world is like that. But if I go back to what I said as a kid, I would write a letter to anyone.
I love that. This is pretty bold.
Without, yeah, I mean, and now I also work with some young students, and I'm like, you want to get into a company, don't wait for the open audition. Of course, apply for the open audition, but send an email, go to the company, try and get in there, ask a friend. Like, for me, it's like there are these rule books. And I think at a certain point, I thought I had to apply completely to the rules. And because I thought that was the correct thing to do. And I think as a kid, I didn't think about what was correct. I thought about what I was passionate about. And then there was a little period in between where it wasn't about my passion, but I sort of boxed in sort of my passion. Because as a kid, if I didn't get an answer to a letter, I moved on pretty quickly. You write another letter, or you get over it, or you. So I didn't take it so much as rejection. I took it as opportunity rather than rejection, maybe. So I think there was a period in the school where and as a professional dancer, where I waited a lot for permission for things. And there is a thing about waiting, but there's nothing wrong with asking. There's nothing wrong with asking, can I dance this role? I'd really like to.
Important point. So for dancers, very often dancers they can't talk. I mean, it seems like everything stopped here. They can only express themselves with their bodies, So I think that's an amazing point, and pretty bold for a 9-10-year-old to go and write a letter and say, how am I going to be able to do this?
I mean, there's also a sense of like anonymity you know, you can write a letter and put it, a stamp on it and put it in the post box, and then it's kind of gone. You know, maybe the writing it is fantasy, the putting in the post box is serious, but then after that, you can't really do anything. And I guess it's not dissimilar from writing an email. It'd be much more difficult to pick up the phone, I think, because then there's, you know, the possibility of a much more direct rejection. But I mean, it's, yeah, it is good. I think it's good to step out there and just ask things. And I have to say, the dancers, because I'm working a little bit with dancers from the National Ballet Academy here in Amsterdam, and in general, the amount that the students, when I give them space, the amount of questions that they will ask, or you know, the suggestions or the feedback that will give to me or to the other students is actually really nice. And so I think there's definitely a shift happening at this age and level too. And of course, maybe that changes when you're in the ballet company context, but I think it's changing.
I hope so. I mean, that would be wonderful. Anyway, so let's get back to you, because you're 16 and then you finally decided this is what you're going to do. So what happened next?
Then I enjoyed very much being at the Royal Ballet School. Still, I always had challenges with my teachers. Always wanted to ask questions or understand things more, or understand their choices, which was very often problematic. Especially, I mean, I had some quite strict Russian teachers who also did the phrase, who practiced the phrase, which is basically do as I tell you, you know. And I would also often ask, oh, why? You know, why is it like this? And not in a way to say that they're wrong, but because I always felt like understanding the methodology would help me get to the result. That was quite difficult and didn't often work. Then I worked quite a lot in my graduating year with Birmingham Royal Ballet as a student, and then started auditioning, and also was invited to take class with the Royal Ballet as a sort of audition. Didn't get the Royal Ballet, was very disappointed, because that my whole heart and soul would want to be here. Of course, that time we were most exposed to. The image is frozen. Do you still hear me?
Yes, I did hear the whole thing, so if you can go on.
Yeah. And then and then I auditioned for Marseille. Had a nightmare audition in Marseille, one of those big cattle calls where after Tendus they kicked most people out. And then I had a classmate, or an ex-classmate, that was from Marseille, and he basically, I spoke to him and said, is there any way I can get back in? You know, my mum paid for me to come here. This is just a complete waste of money and so disheartening. And he spoke to his teacher and they got me back in again. And then during the bar, they said to me in French, we've seen you already. We don't need you here. You know, thank you very much, which I didn't understand. So I just stayed. Kind of awkwardly. And at the end, I invited some of us to stay, which included me. And then the pianist basically called me over and said, oh, you're really lucky because they told you to leave and you didn't, and you just stayed. And I was like, I really didn't understand. So, and then I got through to the end, I think the N3 or something. And they said they would let me know. It didn't work out either. And then I did get an apprenticeship contract in Canada, the National Ballet of Canada, to which I was really interested in it. It was also connected to the school, and I thought extra training would be really good for me. But when I got back to the Royal Ballet School, they said that it wasn't worth it, told me not to go. So I didn't accept the contract and ended up at the end of my graduating year with no contracts. So I was panicking quite a lot. And then the advice a little bit from some of the school and also from my family was, why don't you go to university? Like, give up the dancing stuff. To which I was like, are you kidding me? I went through all of this now just to say, just throw it, you know, chuck it away. And then I was invited by the school to do an extra few months in the school to sort of help while I continued auditioning. And the wonderful Evrinov was in, who'd worked with us on a graduation performance of Le Baide. She was in Munich watching Le Baide there, the Patrice Bart version of Le Baide.
You're talking about Olga Efrenov, because we didn't hear the name. Olga, right?
Yeah, Olga Evrenov, yeah. And she spoke to Ivan Lishka, who was the director at the time, and he said he was desperately looking for boys. So she immediately called the school and she said, you know, you should get Peter over here because they're looking for boys. I think it would work well for him. So I headed over to Munich, December or November 98, something like that. And yeah, that was my first contract. I got a contract there, did a crazy audition where for the first time I did a really stood at the back of the studio copying a really contemporary piece from Leung. Completely didn't know what the hell they were doing. It was just tapping and moving along at the back of the studio, but I got the job and started a couple of months later.
You mean you were auditioning in a rehearsal?
Yeah, so I took ballet class, and then the director said, look, I have no idea what your skills are more as a contemporary dancer, or, you know, if this would fit. So why don't you just join the rehearsal of the Leung piece? What he didn't tell me is they were doing a run through of the piece. So he said, just kind of join in. So I was at the back of the studio, just sort of trying to copy them as they were doing a run through. It was extremely awkward, as were many times with, I mean, talk about being outside your comfort zone. I think Ivan Lishka was quite good at getting people outside their comfort zone, because he really, you know, had no shame, which is wonderful as a performer, obviously. I think he really had no shame. So yeah, and I got the contract in Munich, and that was my first job. Joined just after Christmas in 1998.
So how long did you stay in Munich?
I stayed 4.5 years in Munich. I had a really wonderful time there. The repertoire was absolutely phenomenal. I mean, the range of work from, you know, Madec to Lucinda Childs to all of the classical repertoire, and a lot of Neumayer, like, it was really amazing. But I was also really interested because it was my first company, and I was really interested what else was out there. And I really wanted to be in a city that was a little bit more diverse and maybe a little bit more less perfect. And so I auditioned for Dutch National Ballet and immediately loved, like, the city. And I mean, especially at that time, it just felt so much more international to me as well. And yeah, the city has always been like gently falling apart, which is wonderful. And in Munich, it was the opposite.
Well, no, but I mean, I think it's like a international village, Amsterdam, although it has changed a lot, and it, you know, it became much more corporated, and a lot of, you know, it was very different even 20 years ago, but 30 years ago, it was like literally like a village. And that was so much fun. You were in an international, you know, I mean, a super town, but it was still like a village to live in. So that was fun.
Yeah. So there's an intimacy. I mean, when I say falling apart, I mean that the pavements are a bit broken, the walls are a bit broken. And in Munich, it's also changed a lot. It was perfect. You never see a broken anything in the city. It is literally perfectly flat. Everything is aligned. Anything that breaks gets replaced really quickly. So basically you can walk through Munich with your eyes closed and you never trip. And in Amsterdam, a tree root has pushed up the pavement. You better not walk with your eyes closed. So, and I really liked it. Felt much more alive for me in that way. So yeah.
Because still today, you're still in Amsterdam, right?
So it's still today I'm in Amsterdam, yeah.
So that's how long later?
Yeah, I mean, I thought about escaping or moving. So I did go to France for 1 year.
Yeah, to Lyon, right?
I went to Lyon. For a long time in Amsterdam, I would say I felt like the repertoire was a bit limited after having been in Munich. Um, because in Munich, it kind of felt like the contemporary there was a lot of contemporary repertoire, I guess. I mean, so, like a lot of creations, but you know, also a bit of a collector of also contemporary pieces. And so I kind of felt like I wanted a little bit more of that, especially because I'd started choreographing. And I think when you're choreographing or wanting to, you want a lot of food and a lot of information. And the pieces that were coming to Amsterdam too at the time, Dominique Dumay, Sidi Labich Kawi, Shenwei, like I started to realize like those are were the highlights for me. As I was getting older, they were the highlights of the years. And I was like, oh, maybe I could be somewhere where there are more of those highlights, where it could be more the base. So I was really interested in going to a few companies, and Lyon was one of them. And I tried for a long time to audition. It was so hard to be in contact with that company. I don't know how it is now, but it was so hard to make sort of, you know, that's the sort of company that you send an email to and you just never hear anything ever again. But there was a dancer called Jean-Claude Nelson, who used to be in Munich when I was there, and he was dancing there. And I knew they were on tour. They toured to our theater in Amsterdam. And so I basically asked if I could take class while they were theater. So I ran the basement and took class with them. My work day at ballet, I just had, and it fitted. Took class as a
Wait.
and
Can you repeat this? You
yeah,
just
got a
asked
job.
if
Yeah,
okay, because you cut there. So
yeah. So basically, I was saying while the Ballet de l'Opéra de Lyon were in Amsterdam performing on our stage or on the stage of Dutch National Opera and Ballet, I had a break while they were taking class. So I had a break from my normal working day at Dutch National Ballet, and it fitted with their ballet class. So I basically went to take their ballet class in my break as an audition for their company. I remember our ballet master also stepped into the room like to say we should move studios. She didn't notice that I was in there, but I was pretty uncomfortable auditioning for another company while she was there. But you know, it all worked out, and I got a job with the company, and in 2009 till 2010, I took a season and went there.
so did you take a sabbatical or did you just go and
So I didn't plan to take a sabbatical. I was like, yes, time to move on. But some people suggested to me to take a sabbatical, and it was a really good idea because I took the sabbatical when I realized like, you know, I was already 30 years old as well, and changing companies at that age. Well, I was 29 when I went there, but changing companies at that age already is quite a task. Although the company there was quite mature, but I didn't in the end want to stay in Lyon because at the time the director didn't want anyone to choreograph or be making also their own work, and I really wanted to be making my own work too, because I'd already shifted to that and it felt like something was being sort of held back from me. So I had a wonderful and fascinating year in Lyon, danced also some really great things, some things that I wanted to dance for a long time, and I got to dance stuff there. And then I came back to Amsterdam, 2010, and had 6 years of dancing at Dutch National before I retired.
okay. So what would you say was the most challenging thing? I mean, whether it is as a student or as a ballet dancer, maybe you want to make the difference between the two.
Well, interestingly enough, there are like some realizations that came also much later, and also from speaking to friends who are not connected to the dance world at all. And I think one of the realizations, which is also was my was something that I was doing, is that the sort of the hierarchy system and the way that a ballet company is not dissimilar from the hierarchy and the system of a ballet school. They're sort of built on the same principles. And I think when I was in 2015, so just before I stopped dancing, I was speaking to a friend and saying, wow, I need to stop. I want to stop. I want to do other things, but I'm really afraid to make this jump. And he was like, why? Like, we do this all the time in the business world. Every few years we go to another company to learn, to share, and then we move somewhere else. And he was like, this is such a normal thing. And I was like, well, for me, it's not. I've been taking ballet class every day since I was 11 years old. I've been part of a group of peers every day since I was 11 years old. And he was like, it just sounds like you're graduating from school. Like, a ballet company sounds very much like sort of a direct continuation of the same system as a school. And he was like, sounds like you're doing what I did when I was 25, but you just happen to be 36. And I was like, oh my God, like, it's kind of true for me, but of course it can be different for other people or the way that they see it. So I think for me, the most difficult thing in all of this was actually stepping outside of it after being part of an institution slash institutionalized for so long. It was really difficult to get my head around not being part of the institution anymore, or what that would mean, because I kind of felt like I don't know.
Also, you have to become independent, and that's very difficult when you've been told what to do. Even though you're an artist and you're free on stage, or and you have a certain freedom to express yourself, but your day-to-day life is being controlled completely. You don't have to think about it; it's being managed for you, and that's very difficult to step out of. Because it's like a drug as well, right?
It feels like so much security, and it's in the end what I got very frustrated about too. I mean, I remember in rehearsal process, especially in my last couple of years, it also helped me decide to leave. I realized, being like in these big corps de ballet rehearsals, that it really didn't matter if I was there or not there, and there was no space to sort of be part of the process, because it felt disruptive, and it could even be disruptive. If another person, I remember one particular occasion being asked by one of my colleagues, oh, what is this? What are these steps? And I basically was showing them, and then the ballet mistress was like, that's my job, don't do my job, like, be quiet. And I was just like, oh my God, I cannot, like, at any point, but now I'm 35, this feels so wrong to me, that there isn't a way to do this together, or that it feels like I'm encroaching on someone else's space. At the other side of it, I kind of understood, if you have 30 people or 40 people in the room and everyone is telling someone something, like, it's also a nightmare from their position. But being this sort of silent sort of body that just does as it's told and is shifted around, drove me nuts.
So that was a challenge?
So that was definitely a challenge. So yeah, I think being in the end, not having a voice, and not being part of designing sort of the processes, I would say, as a student, that wasn't really a challenge as such. Maybe I felt like I could have learned better with some things, being able to understand a bit deeper why or where things came from. But definitely as a ballet dancer in a large company, I think that was the biggest challenge, is being sort of to a certain degree diluted into it not really mattering too much in the big ballets whether you were there or not, But then the opposite to that was working on a creation and being in one of these sort of creation bubbles with a choreographer, where the company would split up into smaller groups, and you just felt like the sort of the energy and ideas that sort of flow between you and the choreographer and the other dancers.
It's true that in ballet it can be suppressed a little bit, if you just have to follow whatever you're being told. Then for you, how would you say your transition, from being a dancer full time into being into the, freedom land of not having a real job. How was that transition for you? Because I remember I met you at that time, actually, in 2015, when you left the Dutch National Ballet. And I remember
Yeah.
that summer was pretty
Yeah.
intense for you. So how would you describe that transition for you?
Well, the actual jump in the end, well, the transition was really over a long
Yeah.
period. And I would say the transition has lasted probably from 2015 when I decided to stop until 2022, about 2 months ago. I would say this has been my transition period. Because in 2015, it was like, will I be able to earn enough money? Will I have, like, what kind of social circle will I have? Am I any good at what I'm doing? How will I become good? So there are all these things. Plus, like, I'm a nostalgia addict. I was crying a lot in 2015, 2016 with every big premiere, or, we worked with Sasha Valls, and it was just such an epic, wonderful experience. So it kind of went through this period. And then I would say
It's like mourning,
I
right?
had, yeah, like a mourning process,
Mm-hmm.
including, yeah, exactly, anger, some joy. Like, there's really lots blaming parts, and then so definitely like loads of emotional experiences during that year for me personally. And then I think, of course, we have the COVID thing in between, which uh, was scary, like in terms of not having
So wait,
security.
because by that time you, while it being all scary and all this emotional turmoil, you did create something to I mean a new start for you, right? So would you talk a little
Yeah.
bit about that so we can see how you went on with it?
Yeah, so 2016, when I stopped, well, first of all, here in the Netherlands, there's a program, retraining scheme for dancers, um, which is an absolutely phenomenal program because,
Yeah.
first of all, it already says there's a sort of safety net to help you think and develop a training program or trajectory for you to do another career, which, of course, is completely necessary for a dancer. And I already knew that, of course, I was interested in choreography, very interested in film and photography, and these sorts of different disciplines. And so, together with the sort of advisor from there, we developed a program, um, which I've also been able to adapt as we've been going, which is also really important. But I developed a program as a multidiscipline artist, which meant it was important that I knew some stuff about all of these disciplines and the practicalities. And so I decided, for me, I straight away wanted to get out of Amsterdam when the new season for Dutch National Ballet would start. So I booked a filmmaking course at the New York Film Academy. And I took 3 months to live in New York in autumn 2016, and had just the most amazing time. Learned a lot. The only thing is, for the first week, it was mainly theory, and we had to sit in a chair basically from 9 in the morning until 6. And my body hurt so much from sitting on a chair. I was basically like in a position, like trying to stretch my legs so I could be in a straight line. And I felt insane because I realized I hadn't sat like that, well,
Sure.
ever. Actually, ever. And I just remember being like, oh my God, this is really exhausting. How do people do this?
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't the material. I was like, I just wanted to be able to stand. And so I felt a bit like a crazy person in that first week. And then it became more practical when we were moving again. But I realized that was really strange for me. But being away was great and studying, but I still wasn't really sure what I wanted to do with those things. And I already had some projects as a choreographer, so I knew I had little bits, contracts where I had a bit of money. But now when I reflect back to that period, and I realize, like, I had some support, and I knew also from my mum that if things were terrible, then she could help. Or she said, you could even move into my house. And I was like, that would be.
But
But I
it's
knew
still a safety net, and then that gives
it's
you
a safety
courage to
net.
go on, right?
Yeah, it's a safety net that says you can take some risk, and I mean that's really a privilege to be able to take some risk and try and taste and test things out. So I did the film course. I came back and I had some choreographic projects. I taught a little bit. I was basically testing and trying things out. Did a lot of photography courses, and then immediately with the retraining scheme, I also took some budget to go to London to watch rehearsals of a dance company for a week, to go somewhere else. And they were sort of what I dubbed networking and research projects. So I could just spend time testing and tasting things and checking and seeing what I liked and what I could learn outside of my experience as a dancer, but now like beyond that.
So, but would you name that project? Because, I'm trying to make it, clear. I mean, it's also nice for dancers watching to see what you can do afterwards, because it's a lot of people become teachers, some become choreographers, but it's kind of large. Yeah. And what you created, I think, is really beautiful. So it's called the House of Makers.
Yeah, so I also see the internet connections and say, well, so already actually rewinding back then to when I left Lyon to come back to Dutch National Ballet. I came back, but I knew that I wanted to be creative. And I knew that one of the reasons I left Dutch National Ballet was because I felt like the possibility to be that creative was limited. Dutch National Ballet being a classical ballet repertoire company. And I bumped into also an American dancer who had been in the company, had left the company, and his girlfriend at the time, who's now his wife. And we met in a bookshop, the American Book Center here in Amsterdam. And we weren't really friends before, we were just colleagues, but basically he was like, "What are you doing here? I thought you left." And I was like, "Yeah, but you left." He said, "Well, I'm going back to Dutch National Ballet." And I said, "Oh, me too." And I was like, but I do have doubts about it. I want to be back, but I still want to be making things. And him and his girlfriend were like, "Well, let's not complain about it. Let's just do it." And they already had a collective called Further Labels, and they were doing, she's a writer. So he was dancing / choreographing, she was writing, and they were working with a musician at the time. And they were doing some things for festivals and small festivals and stuff. And so we basically said, okay, let's develop this a little bit further. And we started working together. And a couple of years later, we were like, actually, it's changed so much. Let's give it a new name. And we brainstormed for quite a while. And we started a collective at that point called House of Makers. We started being asked to do things at the Van Gogh Museum. We did something at Boijmans and Beuningen Museum in Rotterdam, some small art galleries, the Ij-Film Museum. And so we started ending up in all these site-specific locations and basically curating and creating multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary art and piecing it together and realizing we had this crazy network of artists and performers, and that actually we just needed these happenings, these moments of creative bubbles to bring people together. So we did this, and for a while, and then they moved to actually the States so he could continue his dance career there. And then in 2000, so it got a little quieter, and then now during COVID, it was like, well, we had some ideas for some projects. And I had met on a creative business course, I'd met a singer called Brigitte Verhagen. And with Brigitte, we said, okay, let's continue making stuff. So she joined House of Makers. And then we said, well, we need funding. Like, let's do this. We're freelancers, so we can't sort of use dancers and people who are employed and then do things kind of for free on the side, more as a hobby. We need to actually pay people and ourselves. So we knew we needed funding, and to do that, we needed to become an official foundation. And so during COVID, it also gave us a bit of space and time to actually formalize it and start applying for funding, which has also been wonderful because especially during COVID, we've been able to hire people, hire freelancers. And of course, there's been a lack of work and a lack of money, but we've actually been hiring people, and that's also felt really amazing to be able to bring freelancers into a project and give them work, give them something, to work on and be part of, and for them to get paid. So
and you
that's where
also
we are
made
now.
this beautiful little short film called Open Up Close. And would you talk a little bit about this, because I think it's very touching. I love the poem. I would say it's like a writing, and then the also the whole movie is very beautiful and touching, and it's been selected. So would you talk about that a little bit? Because I can't remember if the festival has been affected.
Yeah. Well, I mean, during COVID, of course, one of the things that the dance world did was shift a lot to creating sort of dance films and sort of anything that could be on the screen. And that happened for me at the beginning of COVID. I asked pretty early on to Ted Branson if I could do something with dancers from Dutch National Ballet, that I had an idea to film in the very quiet streets of Amsterdam all over the place. And this happened, and it was really nice. It was a great experience, and actually it saw me through the part which was quite lonely, actually, and I could actually express sort of my loneliness through this film, and share it with others. Then I always had good contact with choreographer Daniela Cardim, who's based in London. We worked together a lot at Dutch National Ballet as colleagues as dancers, but also choreographed on each other. And at one point we were talking, and I said, "Why don't you do something for film? Like, this really helped me, and it was really interesting." And she said, "I would love to, but I've never done it before, and I don't feel comfortable. I don't know who to ask. I don't even know really how to start this." And I said, "Well, I'll help you. Like, let's do it." And so to begin with, it was the question of like how this would be. And she said that she's always been interested in choreographing to text. She'd made a piece for Dutch National Ballet, which was based on the Bill Bryson, A Brief History of Everything. I think that's what it's called. And so I asked a writer, South African writer, who's based in Amsterdam, called Julia Beth Harris. And we basically spent several hours on Zoom talking and brainstorming, and basically sharing how we felt about this period, also being in different places and having friends and family in different places. And so she wrote several iterations of the text, and then eventually ended up becoming a poem. And Daniela and I contacted dancers in different continents. We have a dancer who's in Brazil, someone who's in New York, 2 dancers who are in London, 3 dancers who are in Amsterdam, 4 dancers who are in Amsterdam. And we basically said we wanted to have generations basically from 6 until 80 or 84, because we kind of wanted to see how it affected everyone. And a lot of the dance films had been based on sort of the company age dancers. And we used the text as our music. And then later on, we got a composer to score and make music for the whole thing. But we wanted to use the rhythm of the text and the feeling of the text to create the choreography, rather than to use the general feeling of the piece of music. And we tasked everyone to film with their phones, iPhones or, whatever smartphone they had, and to send us the material, super complicated, but worthwhile. So they basically, and in different countries, there were different rules. So in London, it was still limited what you were allowed to do outside. So it kind of felt like they had to sort of break rules to like go and film something. And so it was really, it was a challenge, but it was also a task where it felt like a special task for people to go and make these films and then, get them done and send them to us. And then we found an editor who could help create the sort of, put it together.
Nice. It's a very beautiful, I don't know if I can put it, in the description below. I don't know if it's open, because I know Daniela said they took it out for a while because it was selected for festivals.
Yeah. It's actually be online via one of the festivals, so I can give the link. It was selected in San Francisco for a film festival and in Australia, and I can't remember which one, but there is an online platform via that festival, and until their festival is over, we have to keep it so that it's only available via their festival. But yeah, I can share that link.
Yeah, you'll send that to me so I can put it on. So that's really a very touching movie, and above all now, you know, even more now than during it. I don't know why, you know, because it relates so much, you know, what we've gone through, and at the time we were like so stuck in it, you know. Now it's very different. It's very, very, very touching. So anyway, I'll put it on.
Thanks.
So
Thanks.
we have to kind of wrap this up. So to wrap this up, I would like to ask you if you could give one piece of advice to a young dancer that starts his or her career today, what would that be?
I guess it would be like, don't be afraid of failing. That you know, that I guess that failing is part of succeeding. So never be embarrassed, or like don't be pre-embarrassed about failing. Like try stuff.
Yeah.
Try stuff and allow yourself to fail. I think there's it comes from this design thinking, actually, that's also through the business management degree I'm doing, that you work in iterations. You try and then you change it a little bit. You try and you change it a little bit. But if you don't, if you only want to take a step if you know that you're going to succeed, then the chances that you succeed are very little.
And I find that super
and so I think
important
part of
for ballet dancers, especially, you know, we're so attached to perfection, and it doesn't exist, first of all, and you know, and then you get stuck. You're completely locked up in a box, you know. So yeah, be the little boy, you know, the 10-year-old boy that writes that letter, you know. Every day.
I mean, I guess this is also super cliche, but I absolutely love it. Your best is different every day. Just do your best. Like, and your best today, I can't do a lot today. Tomorrow could be a lot. That's your best. So I think there's this idea of being a high achiever, but it's all part of a process. It's not like this, you know. So yeah, just keep trying.
Okay. Well, Peter, thank you so much for that beautiful interview. Fascinating.
This was fun
to listen to you and your story. I love stories. So thank you very much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.